Chapter 17. The Ivory Abacus. One day Jiro was made to sit before his mother together with his brothers. She said, "There's nothing so bad to tell a lie. If any of you know the truth, say it frankly. Tell me as soon as you can, and grandfather will forgive you." Otami made her investigation about the broken abacus as solemnly as if she were a judge at court. Even her tones sounded like one, but to Jiro it was quite absurd. Grandfather had served as an accountant for the feudal lord before the restoration and was naturally good at the abacus. He kept his old abacus with ivory beads on the shelf in his room. Once in a while he would use it at leisure. He also kept a sword there, but seemed to be more attached to the abacus because of his past career, though in character he was much more a warrior than an economist. Probably he used to be a calm and competent warrior, good at accounting and helpful to his seniors. His attachment to his old abacus became stronger as he got older. He would play with it for some time and stroke the beads gently with the palm of his right hand. He put it in a special case and replaced it on the shelf very carefully. If it was even an inch away from where he had put it last, one of the children was to be severely scolded. He told them that if he took the lid off and had a glance at the beads, he could tell whether it had been handled by some other person or not. That day, one of the beads of that precious abacus was broken. It was a most serious incident to the Honda family. Otami had very good reason to be so anxious about it, but Jiro thought how ridiculous it was. He had never peeped into grandfather's room recently, nor had he dreamt to do so. What use was it, such an old abacus? Just the trash, isn't it? Sitting respectfully in front of his mother was nothing but a waste of time. He wished to get away and join his friends as soon as possible. "Grandfather said it must be one of you," said Otami. "I also have the same idea. Unless you threw it down, it wouldn't have broken like that." Her piercing eyes were turned to Jiro, but he did not mind it at all. He had been pretty bored with her investigation and began fidgeting himself, looking up at the ceiling. Otami never failed to overlook his fidgeting behavior. "Jiro," she said, "you know about it, don't you?" Jiro looked at her, chuckling. "Yes, you do know, don't you?" she assured him in a very gentle voice. "I've never seen grandfather's abacus, mother," he said, looking up at the ceiling as before. "You say you've never seen it?" she said. "Don't be silly." "No, I've never seen it," he retorted frowningly. "You're telling a lie, I know that." "All right then." She stopped, thinking of the school bag thrown into the toilet. It was unwise to scold him high-handedly at the beginning, she thought. There was silence for a minute. Jiro was watching Otami with cynical eyes, as if waiting for her next word. She breathed a sigh and resumed with an episode of the first American president. "Well, let me tell you a good story. Listen," she said to the three boys. "Long ago, in a country called America, there was a boy. One day he was playing in the garden. She told them the episode of George Washington as a boy who cut a precious tree down by mistake and confessed his misbehavior. She told it as emotionally as she could, but both Jiro and Kyoichi had already listened to it before. As he listened to her, Jiro thought that his homeroom teacher could make it more dramatically. Therefore, anyone who will grow up to be great is honest like him when he is a boy. Understand? She said to conclude her sermon. Jiro remembered that his teacher had also concluded with the same words. Wasn't it a matter of course to say that he has done something when he did it? If that was so great, wasn't it much greater to say that he has done something even if he hadn't done it? He was sure that it must be either Kyoichi or Shunzo who had done it, and it would be foolish to take the guilt upon himself. Recently, however, something like heroism had begun to grow in him since his fight on that bridge. Jiro felt he could take the blame for Kyoichi. What if it was Shunzo? At the moment, however, Jiro wished he could do something greater than George Washington. Besides, he was tired of sitting rigidly before his mother so long. "I did it, mother," said Jiro offhandedly. "Yes, you did it, Jiro," said Otami in a most gentle voice. "I knew it all along. Tell me how you broke it." It was an unexpected question. In fact, he hadn't thought out how he would tell his tale. "Be quick, grandfather is angry," she said in a sharp tone, but he couldn't make up a quick explanation for the broken abacus. A slap caught him on the cheek. "You say you've done it, and the next moment you draw back," said Otami, trembling with anger. "How wavering! Listen, George Washington was..." Holding his collar with both her hands, Otami shook him violently, but Jiro was watching her intensely with dry eyes. "To be honest, I didn't break it," he said. Otami let go her grasping hands with a cry of despair. She was panting hard with her pale face. "I can't do anything with you," was all that she could say. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. All that while, Shunzo was watching Jiro timidly, which was unusual for him. Suddenly, Jiro rose up and went out of the room. That day happened to be Saturday, the day of his father's return. He ran into the fuel shed and was thinking what to do. Old Oito and Naokichi visited him in turns and begged him to confess everything to his mother before Shunsuke came back. It seemed that everybody had decided Jiro to be the criminal, but he dared not answer them back. "When father comes home and is told about this, he'll surely come here," he said to himself. "What shall I say to him? Why did I come to take the guilt on myself?" He could not remember what made him tell a lie. His usual stubbornness and cynicism had completely vanished. Poor Jiro! Tears began to drop before he noticed it. He had never been in such a feeble mood. Just then there was a light knock at the door of the shed. Jiro didn't turn back, for he thought it to be Naokichi or Oito again. Nobody came in, and another tapping. It sounded like a small child. Who was it? He turned, and to his surprise, Shunzo was standing at the half-opened door. "Damn him," he said, and bit his lips. But something was different with him. Looking up at him with guilty eyes and fidgeting from side to side, He stood against the door with his index finger in his mouth. How different he looked. Whenever their eyes met, Shunzo would turn away and lean against the door. A few minutes passed by. He might be able to tell him something about the abacus, Jiro thought. He even suspected that his brother might have broken it. "What are you doing there, Shun-chan?" he said gently. "Well, he stammered, stepping over the threshold into the shed. Jiro rose up and walked up to him. "Wasn't it you who broke grandfather's abacus?" he asked, but Shunzo kept silent, rubbing the earthen floor with his wooden clogs. "I won't tell anybody. Just tell me," he said. "Well, yes, I broke it," said Shunzo. Jiro thought that he had got it, but tried not to get excited. "Why did you do it?" he asked gently. The next moment he thought it funny, because it was the same question as Otami had made that morning. "It fell down on the stone while I was playing with it," said Shunzo. "Down from the veranda?" "Yes." "Is grandfather's abacus big?" said Jiro. "No, it isn't. About this size," said Shunzo, holding his hands 7 or 8 inches apart. Jiro had forgiven his brother before he was aware of it. "I see. You can go, Shun-chan," he said. "I won't tell anybody." Shunzo went off toward the main house in relief mixed with a bit of uneasiness. Soon that strange sense came back to Jiro. He was not fully prepared to take the guilt upon himself for Shunzo. He neither loved his brother so deeply nor had any cause to do so. It was a faint feeling of pity that he felt for Shunzo, but it worked to make him realize the advantage over his brother. Jiro felt easy and regained his usual cynical attitude of mind. It was interesting to drive his mother to her wits' end by insisting that he didn't do what he had really done. But it would be more amusing to insist that he had done something what he had not committed. How would Otami respond to him? A cold, cynical pleasure was gradually budding in a corner of his mind, like the falsely convicted person will feel for his stupid judge in prison. There was none to be afraid of. He thought that he would be hit again on the head with a pipe was not so terrible either. He would rather observe how things would go as a third person. He sat down on the piled firewood to think out how he could make reasonable excuses in case he was cross-examined by his mother again. The sun was setting and it was getting dark inside the shed. Soon it would be supper time, but now Kichi nor Oito came to see him. He might be left there alone. Jiro felt a little depressed but did not like to go out shamelessly. "Is father back home?" he said to himself. "If so, what did he think of me when he was told about the broken abacus? What shall I do if he agrees to leave me here?" Something cold crossed his mind. The next moment, however, it turned into a stubborn idea. "They can shut me up in here 2 days and even 3 days, he said to himself. "No, I don't care." In half an hour or so, it became quite dark outside, and Jiro could no longer put up with his loneliness. He felt impatient and at the same time was anxious to know how things were going on inside the house. At last he sneaked out of the shed and came close to the veranda of the living room. where the electric lamp was shining brightly. He could overhear his parents talking. "Then did you ask Kyoichi and Shunzo too?" said Shunsuke. "Yes, I did, though I didn't do that separately," she answered. "That was no good," he said. "If you asked them together, the tide would surely turn against Jiro." "Oh my, do you think all of us put the blame on him alone?" she said. "Even if you didn't say it in words, you did so in your heart." "All right, I'm not going to tell you anymore," said Otami. "I'm not entitled to bring him up." "Stop that," he said. "We can't discuss anything when you're angry like that." "Isn't it you who drive me to anger?" she protested. "I'm saying that Jiro confessed it freely, and yet you think I forced him to admit it, don't you?" "But he denied when he had said, didn't he? That's what confuses me." "He may have been honest in his denial," said Shunsuke. "Do you really think so?" said Otami. "Yes, I do," he said. "He's obstinate, but not the kind of boy who will say one thing and then go back on it so easily. Judging from the fact that he denied his words, he may not have broken the abacus." "Dear me, do you think Jiro to be so gallant as to take another person's guilt upon himself? To tell the truth, I don't understand it either." "You see," said Otami. "By the way, in what circumstance did he confess it to you?" "I told them the episode of George Washington as an honest boy," she said. "Then he became restless. I questioned him a little more questions and I got him." "I see," said Shunsuke, seemingly in deep thought. "So if we educate him with earnest intention," she said, "I do believe that we can bring him up to be a bit more different person." "Do you? By the way, is he still in the shed?" "I think so." "Then I'll go and see him," he said. When his shadow was seen to rise up, Jiro hurried back to the shed and waited for him, holding his breath. Shunsuke came in and held out the lantern close to him. "Don't be silly, son," he said, but his tone was not sharp. "It doesn't matter that the abacus was broken. I'll apologize to grandfather, but it's cowardly for you to say that you have broken it and then deny it immediately." Jiro did not like to be thought cowardly by his father. It would be better to continue to take the blame upon himself rather than reverse it again. "I did it, father," he said definitely, looking up at him in the face. Shunsuke gazed at him intently, which made the little boy feel horrified. "You wouldn't lie to your father, eh?" he said. "I don't like a boy who tells lies, but let me believe what you said. It isn't good to hide in such a place without having supper. Come on with me." Jiro followed his father in tears. "Stop your sobbing. It's no time for that, son," he said, but Jiro did not stop weeping. Shunsuke was watching his son in silence.